Hello, everyone. This is Suzanne at the Gospel Truth. I'm home from the hospital. Hallelujah. They ended up switching up my medication. I have to drink this cocktail throughout the day. It's got lanacane in it to numb my throat and tummy. And I mix it with Malenta to coat my stomach. So I mix those two together, drink it down, and it supposedly numbs everything. They also put me on a different tummy medicine and added a second tummy medicine. I go back December 7th for another checkup to see if this is healing properly. Doctor said it might be a long road, it could be 2 weeks to a month for this to ease up. I have to watch my diet, eat a soft diet, oatmeal, stuff like that, soup, and see how I tolerate that. So they were at a loss as to what else to do for me in the hospital. They said, we can't keep you until this heals. You kind of have to do that on your own at home, which is, fine by me. After being in the hospital for even a day and a half, you get kind of antsy, like, okay, I want to go home. So they did a lot of blood work, and it wasn't too bad, but I'm just glad to be home, and I'm super thankful for all your prayers and well wishes. Thank you so much. That meant the world to me to have that kind of support, and I just appreciate each and every one of you so much. And I see that we do have a lot of new subscribers. Thank you for joining us at the Gospel Truth. We are studying Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, the prison epistles, during the week. Also, I come on and we are doing a reading of a book. The one that we're in right now is called The Hiding Place. Corrie Ten Boom, the story of her life. And I'm not sure who that is in the picture. I think this is Betsy and that's Corrie. And I'm not sure who the other two are. Maybe I'll figure it out during the reading of the book. But that family has a story to tell of what they went through during World War II. And we've already read chapters 1 and 2. If you want to go back and catch up, that would be great. Today we're going to cover chapter 3 of The Hiding Place. And today's is going to be about Karel, a man named Karel. Now, part of what we read in chapter 2 was that Corrie's mama had made a call to a family that had lost a baby. And Corrie went, and when she stepped in the room to the right of the door, still in the crib, was this baby. And Corrie touched the baby's hand. It was really cold. And she followed Nally to our room, crept in bed beside her. That's when they got home, because she was talking about, for all Tangians talk about it, death had only been a word, but now I knew it could really happen. If to the baby, then to Mama, to Father, to Betsy. That night, still shivering with cold, she followed Nally to their room and crept beside her in bed. And then they heard Father's footstep coming up the stairs. And as he stepped through the door of the room, she burst into tears and said, "You can't die." I sobbed, "You can't." And her father wisely again told her about the trip to Amsterdam. And he asked her, when do I give you the ticket? And she said, just before we get on the train. And he says, exactly. And our wise Father in heaven knows when we're going to need things too. Don't run ahead of him, Corrie. When the time comes that some of us will have to die, you will look into your heart and find the strength you need just in time. So in life, we shouldn't run ahead of God. We should wait for him. and he will meet us at the right time and see us through. All right, chapter 3. You have to excuse me a little bit. I don't know if it's the medications I'm taking or what, but my nose is running a little bit. And I hate it when it does that, but I might have to dab my nose from time to time, so I apologize for that. All right, let's get started. I met Karel at the BG. William introduced him, and he shook hands with us one by one. I took that long, strong hand, looked up into those deep brown eyes, and fell in love. Uh-oh, sounds like her first love. Karel seemed unaware of me. I was only 14, while he and William were already university men. It was enough, I felt, to be in the same room with Karel. I thought I was going to love him forever. 2 years later, I saw Karel again when Nolly and I visited William at the university. William's room was in a private home. He gathered both Nolly and me into a bear hug. A second later, the door slammed open and burst 4 of his friends, tall, deep-voiced young men. Among them was Karel. William introduced Nolly and me around. When he came to Karel interrupted. "We know each other already." He bowed slightly. "Do you remember? We met at a party at your home." I glanced from Karel to Nolly, but no, he was looking straight at me. Soon the young men were seated at our feet on the floor, all talking at once. Nolly joined in. She was 18 and had started college to become a teacher, so she chattered easily and knowledgeably about things of interest to students. "And you, Corrie, will you become a teacher too?" Karel was smiling at me. I felt myself blush. "No, I'll stay home with Mama and Tandy Anna." It came out so short and flat. Why did I say so little when I wanted to say so much? That spring, I finished school and took over the work of the household. It had always been planned that I would do this, but now there was an added reason. Tandy Beep had tuberculosis. Around the clock, Tandy Anna nursed her sister, many nights getting no sleep at all, and so all the cooking and washing and cleaning for the family fell to me. I loved the work, and except for Tandy Beep, would have been completely happy. Over Tandy Beep lay the shadow not only of her illness, but of her whole disappointed life. Whole disappointed life. I spoke to it once about Mama, but she was more and more often in bed. But when Mama was not supplying the neighborhood with baby clothes from her flying knitting needles, she was composing cheery messages for shut-ins all over Harlem. The fact that she felt that she herself had been shut in much of her life never seemed to occur to her. "Mama," I said as I sat down beside her, "can't we do something for Tandy Beep? She's so unhappy here." Mama laid down her pen. "Corrie," she said, "Beep is as happy here with us, no more and no less than she was anywhere else." I did not understand. "Do you know when she started praising the Wallers?" Mama went on. "The day she left them, while she was there, she had nothing but complaints. The Wallers couldn't compare with the Van Hooks, where she had been before. But at the Van Hooks, she had been miserable. Happiness isn't something that depends on our surroundings, Corrie. It's something we make inside ourselves." Ooh, that's very important advice. My happiness doesn't depend on my surroundings. It's something we make inside ourselves. You have to create your own happiness. Don't depend on others for happiness. Create it yourself, within yourself. Sounds good? Sounds good to me too. When Tandy Beep died, Mama and Tandy Anna redoubled their cooking and sewing for the needy, as though realizing how brief was anyone's lifetime. As for Tan Jans, she exclaimed at odd moments, "My own sister, while it might have as well been me." A year or so after Tandy Beep's death, a new doctor took over house calls. His name was Jan Van Veen, and with him came his young sister and nurse, Tine Van Veen. It was Dr. Van Veen who discovered that Tandy Jans had diabetes. In those days, this was a death sentence as surely as tuberculosis had been. Tandy Jans went straight to bed on hearing the news, but inaction went poorly with her personality. One morning, to everyone's surprise, she appeared for breakfast precisely at 8:10, with the announcement that the doctors were often wrong. All these tests and tubes, said Tanjans, what do they really prove? So it sounds like she's pulled herself up and, all these tests and tubes, what do they really prove? And she's kind of maybe in a little bit of denial here. I can't imagine the fear that is running through her. From then on, she threw herself into writing, speaking, and launching projects. Only those of us who knew her best were aware, beneath all the activity, of the fear that drove her. Her disease meant that each week a test had to be made to determine the sugar content of her blood, and this was a complicated process, requiring either the doctor or his sister to come to the house. Eventually, Tijn Van Veen taught me to run the weekly tests myself each Friday. There were several steps involved. If the mixture remained clear when heated up, all was well. If it ever turned black, I was to notify the doctor. That spring, William came home for a holiday. He had graduated from the university and was now in his last months of theological school. One evening during his visit, we were all sitting around the dining room table. Father had 30 watches spread out before him. He marked in a little notebook, 2 seconds lost, 5 seconds gained, while William read aloud. The bell in the alley rang. Outside the dining room window, a mirror faced the alley door so that we could see who was there before going down to open it. I glanced into it and sprang up from the table, for at that door, a bouquet of daffodils in her hands, was Tijn Van Veen. Whether it was the soft spring night that put it in my mind, or William's dramatic pulpit-trained voice, I suddenly knew that these two people must meet. For your mother, Corrie, Tijn said, holding out the flowers as I opened the door. No, you carry the flowers. You look beautiful with them, as I pushed the startled girl up the stairs. I prodded her through the dining room door, straining to see William's reaction. I knew exactly how it would be. My life was lived then just in romantic novels, and I had played this scene where heroes meet heroine 1,000 times. William rose slowly to his feet, his eyes never leaving Tijn's. Father stood up too. Miss Van Veen, Father said, allow me to present our son, William. William, this is a young lady of whose kindness you have heard us speak. I doubt neither one heard the introduction. They were staring at each other as though they were not another soul in the room. William and Tijn were married 2 months after his ordination. During all the weeks of getting ready, one thought stood out in my mind. Karel will be there. The wedding day dawned cool and sparkly. My eyes picked Karel from the crowd in front of the church, dressed in top hat and tails as were all the male guests, but incomparably the handsomest there. As for me, I felt that a transformation had taken place since he had seen me last. The difference between my 21 years and his 26 was not as big as it had once been. But more than that, I earnestly believed, all the books agreed, that I would look beautiful to the man who loved me. Corrie? In front of me stood Karel, tall black hat in his hands, his eyes searching my face. Yes, it's me, I said, laughing up at him. But you're so grown up. I always thought of you as the little girl with the enormous blue eyes. He stared at me longer and then added softly, now the little girl is a lady, and a lovely one. Suddenly, the organ music swelling from the open door was for us. The arm he offered me was the moon, and my gloved hand resting upon it the only thing that kept me from soaring right over the peaked rooftops of Haarlem. Corrie's in love. It was a rainy Friday morning when my eyes told me what at first my brain refused to grasp. The liquid in the glass beaker on the kitchen stove was black. I leaned against the sink and shut my eyes. I went over my mind the different steps, looked at the vial of chemicals and the measuring spoons. All just the same as I had always done. The liquid was black. Clutching the beaker, I pounded down the steps. I burst into the shop with the telltale beaker. Betsy, I cried, it's black. Betsy put her arms around me. Behind me, Father came into the shop. His eyes traveled from the beaker to Betsy to me. You did it exactly right, Corrie? I'm afraid so, Father. I'm sure you did, my dear, but we must have the doctor's verdict. I poured the liquid into a small bottle and ran to the Dr. Veen's, where he took the bottle into a small laboratory. There's no mistake, Corrie, he said. Your Annie has 3 weeks at the very most. We held a family conference in the wash shop when I got back. We agreed that Tan Jens must know at once. We will tell her together, Father decided, though I will speak the necessary words. So now they have a task of telling her that she only has 3 weeks to live. I can't imagine the heaviness in their hearts. I don't know if any of you have had to tell someone bad news like this, or heard bad news. You have cancer, you have leukemia, you have cerebral palsy, you have polio. Those are things we never want to hear. And we never want to hear our limited time we have left. Our little possession filed up the steps to Tan Jen's room. She was sitting at her table working on a project. As she saw the number of people entering the room, she laid down her pen. Now she knows something's up, glancing at everybody in the room. Maybe tears filling her eyes a little bit. She looked from one face to another until she came to mine and gave a little gasp of comprehension. This was Friday, and I had not yet come up with the results of the test. My dear sister-in-law, Father began gently, there is a joyous journey with each of God's children sooner or later sets out on. And Jan's, some must go to their father empty-handed, but you will run to him with hands full. All your projects, Aunt Anna ventured. Your writings, Mama added. The funds you've raised, said Bessie. Your talks, I began. But our well-meant words were useless. Tan Jans put her hands over her eyes and began to cry. Empty! She choked at last. How can we bring anything to God? What does he care for our little tricks and trinkets? As we listened in disbelief, she lowered her hands, and with tears coursing down her face, she whispered, Dear Jesus, I thank you that we must come with empty hands. I thank you that you have done all on the cross, and that we all need in life or death is to be sure of this. Mama threw her arms around her, and they clung together, but I stood there rooted to the spot, knowing I had seen a mystery. It was Father's train ticket given at the moment itself. Remember the train ticket? He didn't give Corrie the train ticket till they were at the train station. That at the right moment, in God's timing, things will happen, and God will be with us at that moment. 4 months after Tan Jan's funeral, the invitation came to William's first sermon. In the Dutch Reformed Church, a minister's first sermon in his first church was a most solemn and joyous occasion. Family and friends would come from great distances and stay for days. From his own assistant pastorate, Karel wrote that he would be there and looked forward to seeing us all again. I endowed that word awe with special meaning and packed in a delirium of anticipation. 3 days after we got there, I answered William in Tyne's front door, and there stood Karel, dusty from the train trip. He tossed his bag past me into the hall, seized my hand, and drew me out into the June sunshine. It's a lovely day, Corrie, he cried. Come walking. From then on, Karel and I would go walking each day. We wandered down the country lanes and wound in every direction away from the village. One sunlit afternoon after another. Our walks lasted forever. Often we talked about his future, and suddenly we were not speaking about what Karel was going to do, but about what we were going to do. We imagined that we had a house to decorate and rejoiced to discover that we had the same ideas about furniture, flowers, even the same favorite colors. Only about children did we disagree. Karel wanted 4, while I held out for 6. All this while, the word marriage was never spoken. One day when Karel was out, William came to me with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. Tyne, with a cup of her own, was just behind. Corrie, William said, handing me the coffee and speaking as though with effort. Has Karel led you to believe that he is serious? Tyne finished his sentence. A blush set my cheeks burning. Why? William's face reddened too. Because, Corrie, this is something that can never be. You don't know Karel's family. They wanted one thing since he was a small child. They built their whole lives around it. Karel is to marry well, is the way they put it. But what about what Karel wants? He's not a child now. William fixed his eyes on mine. He will do it, Corrie. I don't say he wants it. To him, it's just a fact of life like any other. At the university, when we talked about girls we liked, he'd always say at the end, of course, I could never marry her. It would kill my mother. Now, perhaps this is something that Karel wished in his heart with Corrie as they went on their walks and talked about children, furniture, and flowers, but he knew deep down in his heart that it could never be. And it's kind of sad. I don't think he meant to mislead Corrie. I think he was caught up in this fantasy. But to Corrie, it was as real could be. The hot coffee scalded my mouth. I made my escape to the garden, where there was hardly a flower that Karel and I had not looked at together, that did not have a bit of our feeling for each other still clinging to it. William might know more than I did about many things, but not when it came to romance. Things like money, social prestige, family expectations. Why, in the books they vanished like rain clouds. Karel left a week or so later, and his last words made my heart sore. Only months afterward did I remember how strangely he spoke them. We said our goodbye outdoors, as if a part of me was disappointed that he still had not proposed. Another part of me was content just to be beside him. Suddenly he seized my hand. Corrie, write to me, he said pleadingly. Write me about the BG. I want to know everything. I want every detail of that beautiful crumbling old house. Oh, Corrie, it's the happiest home in Holland. And so it was indeed. When the others and I returned to the BG, it had always been a happy place. But now each event seemed to glow because I would share it with Karel. Every meal I cooked was an offering to him, each shining pot a poem, every sweep of the broom an act of love. His letters did not come as often as mine was singing to him, but I put this down to his work. The minister he was assisting, he wrote, had turned the parish calling over to him, and church members expected frequent visits from the clergy. As time went by, his letters became more seldom. I made up for it with mine and went humming my way through the summer and fall. One nippy November day, the doorbell rang. I flung open the alley door, and there was Karel. Beside him was a young woman. She smiled at me. I took in the hat with the sweeping feather and the fur collar, and the white-gloved hand resting on his arm. Karel was saying, Corrie, I want you to meet my fiancé. Oh. I must have said something. I only recall how my family came to the rescue, shaking hands, taking coats, finding chairs, so that I would not have to do or say anything for the next half hour. Finally it passed. I managed to shake her hand, then Karel's hand, and to wish them happiness. Betsy took them to the door. Before it clicked shut, I was fleeing up the stairs to my own room on the top of the house. How long I lay on my bed sobbing for the one love of my life, I do not know. Later, I heard Father's footsteps coming up the stairs. For a moment, I was a little girl again, waiting for him to tuck the blankets tight. But suddenly, I was afraid that Father might say, there'll be someone else soon. For in some deep part of me, I already knew there would never be anyone else. Corrie, he began instead, do you know what hurts so very much? It's love. Love is the strongest force in the world, and when it's blocked, that means pain. There are two things we can do when this happens. We can kill the love so that it stops hurting. Then, of course, part of us dies too. Or we can ask God to open up another route for that love to travel. God loves Karel even more than you do, and if you ask him, he will give you his love for this man, a love nothing can prevent, nothing can destroy. Whenever we cannot love in the human way, Corrie, God gives us the perfect way. I did not know, as I listened to Father's footsteps winding back down the stairs, that he had given me more than the key to this hard moment. I did not know that he had put into my hands the secret that would open far darker rooms than this, places where there was not on a human level anything to love at all. So this is going to sustain her in the future for what she's going to be facing. But just then, my task was to give up my feeling for Karel without giving up the joy and wonder that had grown with it. So lying there on my bed, I whispered the enormous prayer. Lord, I give to you the way I feel about Karel, my thoughts about our future. Oh, you know everything. Give me your way of seeing Karel instead. Help me to love him that way. Even as I said the words, I fell asleep. All right, next time we'll be in chapter 4. It's entitled The Watch Shop. It's hard when we fall in love with someone that doesn't love us back the same way. I was head over heels in love with a guy when I was probably about 14, maybe 15. And I always go to his house. He'd be under his vehicle tinkering. We would talk a little bit. But he never said he loved me. We never really went anywhere. And even his friend told me, man, if I had somebody come around, loving me the way you love him, I would treat you a lot better. He was not happy with Larry. And after a while, I did end up going with the other guy for a while. But Larry's sisters did not like me for whatever reason. I think they wanted somebody else for him or whatever, but that never did come to anything. And I think about him over the years. I did meet back up with him many years later when I was married and I had my kids. And he asked me, he says, why didn't you wait for me? I said, wait for you? What do you mean wait for you? You never told me to wait for you. You never told me you loved me. We were good friends. I had feelings for you, but you never expressed anything back. So maybe he was a little sad of what had come and gone. I was a little sad, but always cherished the memories of that love. And I think sometimes we do have to give things to God and ask God to love people as he loves them through God's eyes. All right, that's it for today. It's 27 minutes already. I hope you've enjoyed this next chapter of Corrie Ten Boom's life story. It's very interesting so far. And it's really nice to get in the characters and to feel what they're feeling, to hear what they're saying, and what they can teach us. All right, you take care. You have a most blessed day in the Lord. This is Suzanne at the Gospel Truth, and I will hopefully be on tomorrow. Take care. Bye for now.